The stock market in the US has been closed for about 30 minutes now as I'm recording this. This is Tuesday, November 19th, 2024. NIO will have their earnings before the market opens tomorrow morning. And one of the things that I tweeted out there today as a post, just to let people know, I also put it on the YouTube channel. I said, NIO fam, I'll do a video after market close today. I wanted to watch some things, including XPEV or XPEV, Alibaba, and NIO Stock with both the price action, but also the trade volume. So let's start looking at those and see some of what we saw today. And this is the NIO chart from the beginning of today and through the day. I'm going to now move over and share XPEV, who had their earnings, XPEV, and see if you see some similarities here. And then finally, Alibaba, the BABA chart. You know, one of the things that I've talked about recently is if Alibaba, which is an incredibly profitable company, is not going to see any sort of easing of the price action, and we see it say sub $100 or even $90, which is where it is right now, then it's hard for me to imagine we're going to see NIO stock have any huge moves to the upside. Outside of course, you know, there is the possibility of a short squeeze, but that's not why we're in the play. I just don't want to rule it out. Now, this is the NIO stock chart. If you missed the video, I'll drop it or put a link so you can check it out from yesterday, where I went back and shared some of the price action. One of the things that stood out from the last earnings, which was September 5th for NIO, is we had big volume after that. So here's the day before, September 4th, with volume of only about 49 million shares traded. And the next day, as price started moving up and then continued to move up, the days that it moved up, especially when there was significant moving up with the stock price, we had typically 100 million shares traded or more on those days. So trade volume, that's why I've got it as one of the first short-term indicators for stock price. And what we saw today was about 80 million shares traded. It is a bigger number than what we saw back in September, but I really just, it's hard to know or try to, predict or project what we could see. I'm going to try to offer my thoughts with respect to both downside and upside potential and some of the indicators that I'll be watching for. I also have it very intentionally on screen where these white lines representing the fail silver, where there could have been naked shorting of the stock going on. These were the three biggest spikes we saw in this year of 2024. And not long after the spikes, we saw the NIO stock price go to its lows about $3.80. So my thinking is, if this spike, and perhaps with more, if there is naked shorting going on and we see it maybe even through this earnings, then perhaps we see stock price visit down as far as that, low $3.80 range. Now, the other kind of thinking that I'm just talking out loud, right? Got it at the bottom there, intentionally, no financial advice ever, no advice ever. Are you kidding me? I'm just sharing my thoughts and researching and nerding out with you folks along the way. But my thinking is, if big money does decide it's time to start buying Chinese stocks, then maybe they want to push them down before they buy. And maybe that's some of what we saw. For example, if we go back to today's, lots of selling pressure. And I did not do a cross-reference to see if dark pool activity aligned with that, but it wouldn't surprise me either way. I don't know that that gives us clarity whether or not this is, big money getting long, or whether this is perhaps shorts shorting more. But the fact that BABA had about maybe a little more than its average trade volume. NIO did have more than its typical trade volume. And then XPEV had more than its trade volume typically has over the course of the day. So just kind of throwing those things out there. I don't know that any of them are clear indicators. I just like to think about as many things and try and be objective and observational as possible with all this stuff. I do think that just as we saw NIO make a big move after the last earnings to the upside, and that was the highest recent price action we've seen for NIO stock, we could see that again. But I don't think we see it unless we have really big trade volume consistently over the course of however many days, weeks it might take. And the other thing is, I don't think that sentiment, which is the other, so the three things at the bottom of the screen on the ticker are short-term stock price indicators, trade volume, meaning the daily trade volume, the FTDs, which are delayed lagged data. And so I share them when we get them, and we know these are the big spikes in this year of 2024, but we don't know how this one, for example, is going to affect or impact stock price. The third thing is the sentiment. Sentiment matters. Sentiment continues to be at least choppy, if not negative, towards a lot of Chinese stocks. And I think Alibaba is the clearest, simplest indicator. Those folks are buying back a lot of shares. They should never have any fail to deliver. Data on that has been showing up even during this time frame where they've been buying so many shares back. And this is one of the reasons that I have not wanted NIO to do any share buybacks, because if there's naked shorting going on, that needs to be curbed, handled, and at least addressed from the legality side of it, which should always be in play. But the sad reality is with our markets, that is not necessarily the case. Or once NIO shows profitability, we certainly could see the shorts get torched. It has taken about 3 years for that stock price to be brought back down to where it ran in about 6 months. And that was, I believe, a short squeeze that played out with NIO before. And NIO was not yet profitable. But two things happened. There was really big trade volume. So that, and then also in tandem with that, the fails to deliver dropped off. So I do think that we'll need to see, if we want to see something sustained, we'll need to see that sort of thing take place. But I do think that is very viable. And interestingly enough, I'm going to toss this out there because the last time NIO stock did run was when the Trump administration was in, and they're coming back in January. And interestingly enough, and shout out to Thomas Hayes with his weekly podcast, he's been talking about Alibaba and giving indicators of Alibaba with stock price and what he expects. And he even went back to 2016 and talked about how Alibaba ended up making big moves after the inauguration, which was in January. And so it'll be interesting to see if that doesn't play out, or something like that doesn't play out, not just with Alibaba, but maybe Alibaba as an indicator for big money flowing back to Chinese stocks. I do think that's another possibility. But with NIO, it's so hard to try and call this thing. I just wanted to offer sort of upside downside. We did see a big move after that last earnings. So of course that's possible. But I do think the key super short-term indicator is going to be that trade volume. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it. Also, today being Tuesday, this is when insurance registration data comes out. This data does not come to us from NIO. So I always kind of wait to see what NIO reports after the month is concluded. But for the week of November 11th through the 17th, it looks like NIO with 3,800 on the NIO brand, the premium brand side of things, and then 1,020 on the Onvo side of things. The ramp of Onvo is going to be fun, I think, to watch, especially for those of us who are long-term and believe in this company. And for those who have stuck around to the end, here's a little nugget. Fluffing, one of my regular viewers, came back from China after being there and talking to a lot of people about the smart EVs and Chinese EVs and Tesla and sentiment and this sort of thing within China. And the young generation considers Tesla to be low tech. They also consider NIO to be expensive. So Onvo and Firefly may be the more affordable options with the high tech play and the battery swappable technology that will absolutely put NIO on not just the map in China, but globally. That's kind of the way that I'm wondering if this isn't going to go. And in the meantime, I do think the energy play potential for NIO is probably the biggest or most underrated, under-recognized at this time play that they have, again, long-term. So that all comes back to the consistent overview that I've had, that this is a long-term play, at least for me. But drop it in the comments. I want to get this thing up and out as soon as possible. Have a great day, and we'll see how the earnings goes for NIO tomorrow.